Funding for Books at the Berkshire is provided by the Berkshire Grill in Seattle's Northgate neighborhood. Local flavor and local value, served with a touch of culture. And by Puget Sound's premier garage door company, Precision Door, a name you can trust. Known for its commitment to the industry's highest quality garage doors and garage door openers, Precision Door's quality and service is second to none. For more information about Precision Door, call 888-712-DOOR. By Verity Credit Union, serving Washington communities from locations in Northgate, Alderwood, and Beacon Hill. By Pavin and Riley and Avery Lane Wineries, when quality is your destination. And by Getz Meats, proud to support the Northwest community. By Tony's Coffee. And by the Delta Society. Additional funding for Books at the Berkshire is provided by these proud sponsors.
Hello, and welcome to Books at the Berkshire, where we have thoughtful conversations with local authors about topics of interest to our community. It was Oscar Wilde who said that he found the study of law sublime and its practice vulgar. Lawyers are often the subject of sometimes cruel humor in our society and commonly rank among the least respected of occupations. Yet lawyers can also be popular heroes. Real-life advocates such as Clarence Darrow and fictional characters like Perry Mason inspire us with their clarity of thought, their analytical ability, and their persuasive skills. My guest today gives the opportunity for all of us to use the approach of attorneys to have successful communication in our everyday lives. In her new book, Winning Every Time, Lis Wiehl, University of Washington law professor and legal analyst for Fox Channel News, shows us how to use the skills of a lawyer to win our successful communication daily. Welcome to Books at the Berkshire, Lis Wiehl. It's good to have you back in Seattle. Now, your book is about using attorneys' abilities in our everyday life. Right. You're an attorney yourself. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background here?
Well, I grew up in Yakima. I was born in Seattle, here at the University of Washington, right nearby. And my third-generation lawyer, my dad was a lawyer, my grandfather was a lawyer, both graduated from the University of Washington. Grew up in Yakima, made my way to Harvard Law School for law school, and then came back to Seattle and practiced law here before moving back to New York.
Okay. Now, you actually spend most of your time out doing legal analysis at Fox News. Do you practice at all?
I'm still of counsel with a firm here in town called Perkins Coie, and I'm still a law professor at the University of Washington on a sabbatical.
On a sabbatical?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you intend to come back to the university at any time?
I have one more year on sabbatical and then maybe back after that.
And how will that work with your legal analysis duties when you come back here to Seattle?
Somehow I'll be analyzing everything. As my brother said, you know, every time you've got an opinion about everything.
How does the work that you do as a legal analyst compare to the work that you actually did as a practicing attorney? Are you drawing on a lot of the same skill sets, or do you have to put a different spin on things?
No spin. I'm part of the no spin zone, so we don't spin anything. But if I didn't have the background that I did, both as a prosecutor and a private lawyer, I couldn't be making the analysis. In other words, that's what I draw on every day when I'm asked to analyze what's going on in the Martha Stewart case, or the Kobe Bryant case, or the Michael Jackson case. I'm remembering back to what I did as a lawyer, both in civil practice and as a prosecutor, and then taking that and extrapolating from what I knew, and of course the research I've done, et cetera, to make an analysis, and hopefully a thoughtful analysis on all of these different subjects.
Your experience as a practicing attorney has been quite broad. You mentioned that you were a federal prosecutor. You were also counsel to the United States Congress during the Clinton Impeachment situation, weren't you? How did that affect you?
That was an amazing experience. I mean, here I was, you know, from Yakima to Seattle, sort of to Washington, D.C. I don't think I'd even been to Washington, D.C. before I came in, right as the Starr report was coming out. I flew across the country from Seattle to Washington as the report was hitting the country and landed in D.C., went right into the secure room, we called it, where the report was, all of the evidence was. And for the next 3 months, I don't think I was there and I was in the hearings and I was working incredibly long hours to try to come up with the Democrats' response to the Starr report. It was an amazing experience, and one that I hope not to repeat, though.
I think we all
Once
hope
in a
that.
lifetime.
That's quite an introduction into Washington, D.C. politics,
Absolutely,
too, isn't it, for a young
absolutely.
lawyer? Now, you just mentioned that you were born and raised in Washington State,
Yes.
in Yakima. And I understand that this being SCCtv, your mother has a connection with the community college here.
Absolutely. My mother
Tell us
right over
about
there. I don't know if you can see her. My folks are here. My mother just retired. I don't think she's ever going to retire from anything, but officially retired last year from YVC, and I had the honor of being there to speak at the YVC commencement, at which they gave her the sort of the Professor Emeritus, Grand Poobah award, and it was just such a delight to see her. She was raised in Denmark and came to this country on a scholarship to the University of Washington, where she met my father, and ended up teaching Americans how to write and read English. In fact, her specialty really was Shakespeare. So it's an incredible story.
So you've got a lot of connections to our state, raised in Yakima,
Absolutely.
and your connection with the University of Washington. You yourself, though, you were educated at Barnard,
Right.
University of Queensland, that's Australia.
Australia, yes. And a year in Australia.
Nice. And Harvard Law School.
Yes.
Although I understand that your undergraduate degrees, I mean, like your mother, your undergraduate degree was English,
Right.
as well as science, and your graduate degree, your master's degree, was in literature.
Right.
You ever miss that world now that you've moved into the legal world, that whole world of belletristic writing and
It's interesting when you like that. What I've really done, I think, is held my upbringing. My father is a lawyer and would tell stories at the dinner table about cases. I didn't realize they were legal cases. They were just people in trouble who had stories, and he'd talk about those stories. And my mother was a teacher. So now I sort of write stories. And in the book, there are tons of stories about people and problems and their trials and how the law can apply. So really, the law is telling a story and helping people through stories. So to me, I was trapped from the beginning with the lawyer teacher as parents. I think this was it. It was meant to be.
to pull this thread of literature and story into
Absolutely.
your legal
The
practice.
best lawyers, the best trial lawyers are wonderful storytellers. I guarantee, well, I don't guarantee because I don't know, but I bet that you didn't wake up this morning and read Hansel and Gretel or Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? But I bet you could recite that right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's because you remember them from childhood. And so that's what good lawyers do, tell stories that resonate with the juries. And that's what we can do in our lives. We can tell our stories so they resonate with the people we're trying to persuade.
In Winning Every Time, you mentioned that there are a lot of stories in that, and it's a big story in itself of your coming to the practice of using these techniques in everyday life. How was the process of putting that into a book for you? I mean, there's a difference between telling a story in front of a judge or in front of a jury or in front of me.
Right.
What was the writing process like for you to take all of this accumulated wisdom and get it in a book?
Thank you for calling it wisdom. I appreciate that. I hope it looks easy. I hope when you read the book, you sit down and it's a fun read, it's an easy read. That would be great because it was not to write. It's the hardest thing to make writing look easy, to not have the narrator, the writer, so much in your face that it's difficult to read through. I spent 6 years really inventing this concept of the 8 steps that I talk about in the book. There were no 8 steps. There was no template to work off of. It came after interviews with friends or chats with friends or cries with friends. It came after walks on the beach. It came after thinking about these things for a long time, jotting down which became steps, jotting down different theories, and back. What was really important when I made a case in the courtroom, and what was really important when I talked to people and tried to give advice to people that I knew in my life.
Was there a difference for you in the process of writing for a general audience as opposed to the process of writing a brief where it's clear exactly who you're speaking to, a particular judge whose own prejudices or biases you may well know if you've practiced in the court
Right.
before. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think the primary difference was that when you write a brief for a client, for example, whether you're defending somebody or prosecuting somebody for the state or the government, you're writing from one perspective. You're taking the facts or the cases or the stories, and you are spinning them to persuade. So you want one outcome, which is the same as I'm trying to do here in the book, is to sort of help people, but you're very focused on what that outcome is, and you're writing towards that. All the facts are towards one outcome. When I thought about the book, it was much broader. As I say, I invented these steps, so I didn't have an end game here. There was nobody at the beginning I was trying to persuade. It was what is going to be most helpful. It was a much broader brushstroke that I could paint. And really, when I sat down to write the book, it wasn't about, persuading one side or the other. It was about, let me tell you the story about what I've learned. Much broader than a kind of narrow legal.
Now, I understand that there was a particular incident that might have coalesced all of this thought that you had into the idea of putting it into a book, and it was a circumstance with a coworker or a staff member. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
A good friend of mine that I was working with came in and my office. She was just in tears. She had gotten a really poor work evaluation. And I've known this woman for years, and she's just terrific, and the most dedicated person you could, loyal, did everything. And she just lost it when she got this, and she came to me, and I sort of sat down and I said, all right, let's figure out what to do. What's your theory of the case? Which a good trial lawyer knows you always have to go into the courtroom with a theory of the case. You never open your mouth without that. That's your theme. What is it that you want? And it took us a while. It wasn't something she just sort of rolled out of bed and said, this is it. But she said, my theory of the case is that I need to get this evaluation redone. This is not fair. I'm a good worker. And so we went from there. We picked her jury, her audience, who to go to. We did discovery. I told her, you need to get the work manuals at work. You need to find out what the other people have said about you. You need to amass all of this discovery. You need to find out the bad things that people have said so you can counter your supervisor's claims. And in doing that, we really sort of started to come up with the 8 steps. After that, I walked down the hall. Another friend of mine was going through a nasty divorce. She also ended up in the book as well because of the things that she was dealing with her husband and her children. And I realized that the same things I'd work in the work evaluation would also work with my friend going through a divorce.
And these were the as you said, the steps that kind of arose out of
Right.
just thinking about these things like a lawyer.
Like a lawyer, exactly.
Right.
Thinking like a lawyer.
A little sidebar here for just a second. When you're thinking about putting together a book that's going to help people
Right.
and help them engage in more effective communication, did you think about kind of this popular anti-lawyer backlash and how that would play with just basing a book on that conceit?
Of course.
And what did you think about that?
Oh, I mean, when I would tell people this is what I'm thinking of doing, lawyers help us? You've got to be kidding. And really, and then even when I was shopping at the publishers, they were reticent about, what you mean, you're going to use legal skills on your children? Because there's a whole chapter on advocating with your children, advocating with loved ones, and there's a chapter for women only, which of course you did not read, right, Walter? You're not supposed to read that. And what I said was, I'm not trying to turn people into little lawyer automatons. That's not what this is about at all. But if you can use the skills that lawyers know, yes, you can use them with your children. And you can help your children learn how to advocate for themselves. Because one of the big premises in this book is that, like lawyers or hate lawyers, advocacy and negotiation are part of our day-to-day lives. And we can choose to just kind of stick our head in the sand and say, no, I'm not going to deal with it. We can get emotional like my friend did with her work review. We can, wait for our knight in shining armor to advocate for us. Or we can do, which is what I hope this book will help you do, learn how to advocate for yourself using the skills of a lawyer.
Okay. Well, we've talked about it and around it a little bit. Look, can we go through the 8 steps of acting like a lawyer or thinking like a lawyer to advocate for yourself? So just start us at the top.
First of all, we've talked about you've got to know your theory of the case.
Absolutely.
What it is you really want. I mean, is it that you're upset that your husband is on the computer too much? Or is it really what you want is that he's not spending enough time with you? Find out what your theory of the case is. That you want your kid to stop, hitting on his sister, or that you've got to respect boundaries more. Or you want the raise, or do you want the respect? What is it that you want from any particular situation? What's your theory of the case? Exactly, your theme. And then the next step in any kind of negotiation is to pick your jury, just like a lawyer would do what we call voir dire, which is you ask people questions and you get people on your side, you hope on your side. Somebody that has the authority to grant you what you want. If you're talking about a consumer negotiation and you're yelling on the phone with the cable provider, probably that person is not going to be able to get your bill reduced. You might want to speak to a supervisor. So always know who your audience is, basically.
And the next step is gathering your evidence.
Yes, doing your discovery, or as I tell my son.
A lot of people don't have time for.
Right, is do your homework.
Yeah.
You know, homework doesn't end when you're out of high school. Homework, you're going to have your homework all through your life. Find out what helps your case, all the good facts, and find out what the bad facts are too. You've got to know what the bad facts are going to be as well.
Okay. Now you say you need to advocate with confidence.
Having done all of that, figured out what your theory is, who your audience is, gathered all your discovery, then you put it all together into what a lawyer would call an opening statement and organize brick by brick by brick what your evidence is going to be. That's very important to put it all together.
And you mentioned gathering evidence that's contrary to your own case, and that's
Right.
to prepare for your cross-examination, as you call it.
Exactly. You've always got to be ready to counter the cross. In other words, if we're talking about something, I've got to know, all right, what's Walter going to say to me? I can't just come at you with what my side is going to be, so that then I'm ready for your counterclaim, your cross-examination. And I always say the best cross-examination is not cross. It's the step, very methodical cross-examination. I think I learned how to do cross-examination fairly well in the courtroom, but when I was a baby prosecutor, I remember one case where I just lost it. I mean, the guy was lying on the stand. He was lying. I wanted this Perry Mason moment of, him falling apart and saying, "That's true, I did it." And of course, that wasn't what happened. And I got emotional. I lost it in cross-examination, and I realized it was terrible. I did a terrible job. So what I hope this book will do is show you how to do an effective cross-examination without getting too emotional about it.
And that sort of plays into the sixth step, which is staying true to your case. And this seems to me somewhere where a lot of people can use a little bit more focus in negotiations of this kind, is getting distracted from that theory, which was step one, and moving into other areas.
Avoiding the spins, as I call them. Anytime somebody said, "Well, he told me that she said," you should know, what a lawyer would know, that's called hearsay. Yeah. It means it didn't come from the person that you're actually talking to. It came from somebody else. And as we've all known from the kindergarten game, we're around in a circle, and what starts out with Joey and ends up with Josephine are completely two different messages. That happens in life. So avoid hearsay, avoid getting too emotional, avoid the red herrings. And I go through all of what they are in the book so you can know, red flag, avoid this because I'm starting into the spin zone here.
Get back and refocus.
Right.
Pulling in all of the talk that we've had about stories and writing, the seventh step is tell your story.
Tell a story. Once you've done all the things we've just talked about, and you've gotten to the person, your jury, to listen to your evidence, and they know what you're talking about, they know what you want, then it's very effective to personalize it. That's where you do get more emotional and tell a story, why this is so important to you. I remember with my daughter, for example, I needed to get her into some eye therapy for her eyes, and the school had very, very defined rules about when you could take kids out and when, and this did not fit. But I told the principal a story about how important it was for her to get this prophylactic help and how we were all in it for my daughter's good and how this was so important. And I just kind of laid out a story for him and then made my closing argument, which is sort of the last step here. Sum it up. In other words, we approach our trials, it's the most important thing. When you're asking for your raise, that's the most important thing going on in your life. It might not be the most important thing going on in your boss's life. So you've got to sum it up at the end. Okay, this is what Walter wants again. This is what he's asking for. Hit it home. You've told your story so that you've motivated your juror, your boss in this case on the raise, to say, okay, now I'm giving you that raise. Walter, let me write that check out for you.
These steps seem like guidelines for logical thinking and critical analysis, which are things we probably all should do a little bit more of as we talk. And although the subtitle of your book talks about the trials of your life, this really isn't only useful in these adversarial situations. Any kind of negotiation or miscommunication that's occurring can be helped by this.
Absolutely.
Are there situations that you think that this kind of approach is more applicable rather than less, or situations where perhaps that there's a different goal that the two parties have that maybe you want to try something different? I mean, life's more complicated than just one set of rules.
And you don't have to go through step by step by step. You're going to cherry pick sometimes, but what it gives you is in those heated moments when you kind of need, as I tell myself, I give my kids time out, I give myself time out. I'm walking around the block. In those moments of just walking around the block, you can kind of go through the and say, all right, well, the jury is easy here. I know it's my child or whatever, but here's what I really need to focus on is what they just said to me in their cross-examination. How do I come back to that? So you'll cherry pick on the steps, but it gives you a methodology to follow and just that confidence. Because I think so much of where we put our head in the sand or we wait for our knight in shining armor in advocacy is that we're not confident in our own ability to persuade. And by that I don't mean arrogant, and by that I don't mean condescending, because juries in real life, as in our daily lives, can see right through that. We don't want to be anybody that we're not, but if we can sort of follow and pick apart the steps, I think they are applicable to just about every part of your life, even with your kids and your loved ones.
So it's a model for how to think about things rather than necessarily a blueprint for how every conversation is going to go.
Exactly.
I think some people might argue that there are some circumstances that we have where the goal isn't to win. Perhaps it's exploratory or it's discovery.
But see, I would say even there, winning is in the eye of the beholder. Winning sometimes, and I talk about this in the book, it's not winning at all cost. I mean, we have to put our head on the pillow at the end of the night. We have to be able to look at ourselves. And sometimes winning is realizing, yeah, you're right. I listened to your cross-examination, and you're right. You read the book, I read the book, it's a stalemate. and that's a win-win situation as well.
I have to say it was a little remarkable. I went to a few websites doing some searches on the book and on your, and there's one website by and about lawyers, and the response to the book from people who hadn't even read it was extremely negative in terms of this anti-lawyer thing we were talking about. A couple called him on that, but I have to say that your reliance on the ethics of the situation in the book and your emphasis on stressing that is consistent throughout the book, that this isn't a system for getting what you want at all costs.
No, that's another book. Somebody else can write that book. I'm not writing that book.
Let me ask you to put your legal analyst hat on for a second here. And we've gone through the steps, and we've talked a little bit about how they developed and how they applied to all different circumstances in life, and maybe just a little nutshell, if you would, on some scenarios or incidents, famous or not so famous. Just getting back to some of your background, the Clinton impeachment. Was that a case of the impeachment prosecution not having all their steps in a row, or why do you think that failed? Which aspect of it might have been most important?
Well, it was a different impeachment than with Nixon, for example, because here the Starr report really was an indictment. It was a charging document rather than a discovery document. With Jaworski, really what he presented was, here are a bunch of things, committee. You look at all of this and you guys all decide. With the Starr report, it really was, I think it started as 14 charges, and they were really outlined as charges. You had an imbalance of power because the Republicans had the purse strings and the votes, and you saw it by the number of lawyers that were representing the Democrats. I think there were 5 of us, and the number of lawyers representing the Republicans, I think there were 20 or 25. And I talk a little bit about in the book that even there, how we used, well, I didn't know they were the 8 steps at the time, but how we used some of the 8 steps to get at least some things that we wanted, like paper and pens and offices, basic things like that. That was a very political process more than a legal process, and that was completely fascinating. It was very interesting to me to note that in the off-camera hearings, where it was just the committee talking about different things to do during impeachment, it was very little debate, and very much a sort of Democrat vote, Republican vote. When the cameras came on and the heat came on, it was amazing how much there was a debate all of a sudden about the very same topics.
Yeah, the political element layered over that kind of obscured perhaps some of the legal principles that were going on there. Okay. What about going from the grand to the mundane, the common aspects of everyday life? I work in the community college system, and I'm advocating for a new budget for a tutoring center. Tell me a little bit about how you think your 8 steps would apply in that circumstance, just so people can...
So first of all, you figure out, do you have a dollar amount? What is the theme of your case? Is it money? Is it a new center? Is it new equipment? What is your primary goal? You figure that out first. Who do you approach? Is it your colleague? Is it your boss? Is there someone that's actually going to sign off on the line?
One committee.
Exactly. You've got to figure out. Then I would say one of the most important things, those are probably 2 fairly easy steps, but the third step is going to take some work. Do your discovery. Get affidavits from people, students, be creative. Think about how, if I were a lawyer and I were trying to convince this committee or this person, how would I put my case together? What would be compelling? It's not necessarily just memos that have flopped on your desk. I mean, can you get affidavits from students saying, I really love this class, but I've learned that if I could have had this system or this computer or this network, it really would have helped in this way. Boom, boom, boom. Talk to teachers outside of your nexus. Talk to people that have the money or have the computers or have what it is you want. Get affidavits or statements from them. Find out what it's going to cost. Find out how it would be done. Problem solve. In other words, don't just say, I need this money, give it to me now. I need this money because, and here's how I can support it. Counter the claims. We don't have enough money. Joe Blow got all the money that you would have gotten, so, whatever it is that you're going to counter, know what it is you're going to have to counter. Tell a story. Again, you're probably going to get that from affidavits from students. Maybe bring students in with you. I mean, that's pretty powerful if you can do that. And sum it up with what it is, again, you want.
Do you find in just your experience in helping people with this kind of communication that there's a cultural context that affects how successful you can be with this? I mean, you're bi-coastal now. You're still associated with the University of Washington here in Seattle, but you're living in New York and working for Fox. I've lived both places as well, and New York is a much more go-get-em, confrontational kind of community where people are used to conflict and don't shrink from it. Whereas people have said the Northwest, for example, is a little bit more reluctant to actually engage in open conflict and might do a little avoidance and then deal with it in a different manner. Do you have problems like in a circumstance like that, getting someone just to engage with the discussion, and how would you respond to that?
I mean, I agree generically as to what you're saying, although I found New Yorkers incredibly generous and open-hearted and wonderful. I mean, so it's, and I don't know, I've certainly growing up here, I remember going to dinner parties and being the only, Washingtonian at the dinner party. So, we have transplants from all over the country that come here because it's such a wonderful place to live and to bring up a family. So I don't know, people are people everywhere. And I don't advocate, as you say, confrontation really at all. I mean, sometimes you're going to get mad, but that's not using the hate steps. The hate steps will sort of help, to kind of, deal with it, but then realize that's not usually the best way to persuade. So again, I'm going to have lawyers mad at me from all over the country because I'm telling you not to get mad and not to fight. And here are ways that you can use what lawyers know to actually get around all of that.
Do you find you have to pull out your list of 8 steps to keep you on track when you're dealing with Bill O'Reilly over at Fox?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, he always teases me. He says, you use this on me all the time, don't you? And I say, yeah, I do. Yeah.
That's kind of what they pay for.
That's what it's about. Yeah.
How have you found yourself coming from a fairly liberal background, it seems, moving into that environment there? Have they made you feel welcome? Is it a good place to be?
It really is. And what I love about it is they hired me knowing that I'm, from Yakima, but work for the Democrats and, have this background. And really, I'm fairly independent on my thinking. I don't know what Bill's going to say on any given time, and he certainly doesn't know what I'm going to say. I've never been told what to say or not to say. So what can be wrong with that?
Doesn't sound like much. Now, I understand that you have a new book coming out pretty soon. The People versus George Bush, which is an examination of the current presidential administration. You think you're going to need to do a little persuasion that that's going to be okay with your friends down at Fox? Or?
Well, honesty is the best policy, and as again, I've never been told what I should say or can't say. And we'll just see, I'm just going to tell it like it is.
They probably actually like the sparks a little bit, don't
they?
they?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
One last thing before we go. Do you have your own favorite lawyer joke?
Let's see, the one with the tread in the road. So,
thank you very much.
This
has been absolutely delightful. We wish you the best of luck. Lis Wiehl, the book is Winning Every Time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Walter.
On Books at the Berkshire. Thank you for watching Books at the Berkshire. We hope you join us again next week. If you have any questions about this show, the current book, or any of the shows on SCCtv, please check out our website. Thank you very much. We hope to see you again here next time at the Berkshire Grill. I'm Walter Hudsick. This has been Books at the Berkshire.
This program was produced by SCCtv, Seattle Community Colleges Television, the face and voice of the Seattle Community Colleges, serving 55,000 students at 4 campuses and 5 learning centers. The affordable gateway to higher education.